Hi there. So thank you all for coming, all you people. My name is Yves Gonet from Huntington. Actually, how many other people here, show of hands, are from Huntington? Cool. Way to go, thank you. So for all of you who aren't from Huntington, welcome to our town hall, and an event where you should have an opportunity to hear some interesting dialogue between our moderators and our panelists, and also have some floor questions. So there's a little bit of housekeeping I wanted to make sure got taken care of first. Cell phones, if you could put them in airplane mode. We're recording this via Zoom on the very sketchy bandwidth of this old building. And we want to make sure that we get a good, clean recording, so we want to have as little interference going as humanly possible. So airplane mode or off would be ideal. So tonight, after I get a quick drink of water, we're being hosted here by Huntington Acts Now and Camel's Hump, Indivisible. And some of you will know what one is or what the other one is. They're very, very similar organizations in that we exist to deal with this mess that we're in. And they're two slightly different models. Indivisible is following a national model that's got a very robust framework and is still very grassroots, but the communication is different than what Huntington Acts Now does. Huntington Acts Now works on a listserv, and things can happen very, very quickly. There's a lot of information that comes out, and there's a lot of opportunity for people to take action, regardless of whether that's phone banking or showing up at some location that needs some support, whether it's an ICE facility that might be potentially detaining somebody. We've been there to sort of help stop that. So a lot of really sort of exciting things that we're able to do, and we're collaborating together as we sort of build a coalition of folks throughout the state. And Huntington Acts Now is a little bit of an experiment that we're doing to see if we can get more people who are neighbors and friends engaged and bringing their neighbors and their friends in to do something. And we provide essentially some lists of things to do through Camel's Hump Indivisible. Many of us belong to other organizations as well. And Camel's Hump Indivisible just joined the Vermont Democracy Alliance. So now we're in a much bigger pool with VPIRG and VNRC and VCV and 5051 and 350 and Third Act, so that we can basically be marching in the same direction and coordinating things tighter. So what we're going to cover a little bit at the end is how you potentially can get a little bit more involved and get people that you're connected to, your personal networks, involved. So, without further ado, I have to grab the piece of paper. Oh, not that one. There we go. Well, I thought I'd ad-lib the introduction of our moderators, but hearing stuff in their own voice, I think, has got some benefit. So our moderators tonight are Jenna and Henry. And Jenna is a member of the Huntington community. She works nationally in community facilitation and philanthropy with a focus on rural communities and economic development. Over her 12 years in town, she has contributed to several local volunteer efforts, and she's also a mom of 2 young kids. Thank you for being here. And Henry, whose arm I didn't have to twist to become moderator, which was great, is a 10th grader at MMU. He's called Huntington his home for his entire life. In addition to involvement in several activist groups at the high school, he organizes Youth for Change, a youth activism group based in Huntington. The focus of his activism includes sustainability, LGBTQ+ rights, minority inclusion, and some income inequality work. Let's hear it for Henry. So, a couple of last-minute notes. There's an elevator in the building. If anybody needs the elevator to go downstairs, please use it. It's really, really slow, but it's way better than those stairs. Also, there are 2 bathrooms downstairs that are handicap accessible. So if you need them, sneak on out, and that's it. Thank you.
It's on now? Yes? No? No. I'm taking this one. All right. Good evening, everyone. Man, I may be nearly 3 times Henry's age, but not nearly as many credentials as I feel like he just listed for him. But my name's Jenna Koloski. I live here in Huntington. I facilitated community dialogues all around Vermont for many years before now working nationally, and I get to have conversations like this all around the country. And my privilege is that I get to brag about Vermont wherever I go because we have such a long tradition of local democracy and civic dialogue and getting together in rooms just like this and having these types of conversations. So just really excited to have that with you all tonight. Because of that background, I really value civility and honest and open discussion, and that's the plan for tonight. I really want to keep this, I really want to model what it can look like to be in the room together and have an open, candid, civil conversation, even if we might not all agree, whether it's with our panelists or with each other. The other thing I really value as a moderator is brevity. So that's the other thing that I'm going to keep tonight. We've got only about a half an hour with our panelists up here, a little more, and then we're actually going to come out to the floor and hear from all of you. I know you have questions for the panelists as well, and so we'll just want to make sure to keep it as concise and brief as we can, both for our panelists and for our participants. So a couple things about tonight. The really neat thing is that despite all those credentials, we didn't come up with these questions tonight. These questions are all coming from you. You may remember when you registered for the event, you may have entered a question that you have for the panelists up here. We took those questions and kind of consolidated them into those that we're going to ask of our panelists, and then and I think it's going to cover a lot of them, but if we don't, just remember that you'll have a chance to ask questions from the floor as well. So keep it civil, keep it fun, keep it curious, and brief, wherever possible. And with that, I want to turn to our panelists and introduce them, and then I'll hand it over to Henry to start us off with the first question. So first, we have with us tonight Attorney General Charity Clark, who is the first woman ever elected to that office in Vermont. Yes. She is a Southern Vermont native and grew up working in her family's small grocery store, an experience that shaped her lifelong commitment to supporting small communities, local businesses, and the people who keep them going. And in her work, she champions consumer protection, environmental justice, and equity for all Vermonters. Thank you for being here, Attorney General. We have Representative Theresa Wood with us tonight, a longtime Vermont State Representative serving the Washington-Chittenden District. Before joining legislature in 2015, Theresa built a career in state government advocating for people with disabilities, and most notably serving as Director of Developmental Disability Services and Deputy Commissioner for the Department of Disability, Aging, and Independent Living. In the House, she chairs the Human Services Committee, advancing her passion for equity, community care, and support for Vermont's most vulnerable. And then, last but not least, we have Representative Tom Stevens. I was first elected to the House in November 2008. He served from 2009 to 2024 on the General Housing and Military Affairs Committee, where he led legislation ranging from increasing our investments in affordable housing, minimum wage, Abenaki recognition, equity in the workplace, and support for our veterans and the National Guard. He currently serves on the Appropriations Committee, and Tom lives in Waterbury with his wife, Liz. Welcome, Tom. So just thank you all so much for being with us tonight. And with that, I'll hand it to Henry to start us off.
Thank you. We just heard a bit about you from Jenna, but we'd also like to hear a bit more about your path toward your roles. What drove you to end up in these positions and take on this challenging work? And now that you're here, what are your passions in politics, and what are your top priorities as an elected official?
Let's pass that down.
Okay, I guess I'll start with this one. I really never sought to get into politics. That's the first thing. The P's that I was really interested in were working for the people of the state of Vermont, enacting policy that was going to assist them to live the best lives that they could in this state, with the assistance of programs that would meet them where they needed to have assistance. And so those were the first 3 P's that I have as priorities, and I still do. However, you don't get in these positions without having to deal with politics either. So I do have to deal with politics on a day in and day out basis, and that's the least fun part of this job, I can tell you that. You heard a little bit about my bio, and I'm a big advocate for individuals with disabilities, for older Vermonters, for people with substance use disorder. In my committee, we deal with everything from birth to death and everything in between. So those are things that light my passion day in and day out. So thank you.
Thanks so much for having me here tonight. It's really wonderful. This is my first time at the Huntington Town Hall, and it's so beautiful and charming. I was always interested in government and politics, but never saw myself becoming a lawyer because I literally didn't know any women lawyers, not one in my town. The only lawyer I know who was a woman was Claire Huxtable on The Cosby Show. So she's my ride or die. And here I am. I'm a 10th generation Vermonter on both sides of my family. So what's pretty hardcore, maple syrup is running through my veins. And I'm passionate about the state of Vermont, and wherever I go, I'm always very passionate about Vermont. So serving Vermont and my community is really second nature, especially having grown up in a small town, not quite as small as Huntington, but a small town nonetheless. When I started my journey as an attorney, I started it here in Vermont, and then I went to New York.
Paying very close attention to the things that the current administration here in Vermont is doing with regard to changes that they're making and things where they decide, yeah, we're going to comply this time, or no, we're not going to comply. It's kind of hard to predict sometimes about which way the wind is going to blow. So it's something we are dealing with on a day in and day out basis.
Just before we hear from the Attorney General, anything to add on kind of the policy side, and then we'd love to hear the.
Yeah, I mean, another facet of, and we're talking about HUD a little bit here. One of the areas that I work on in appropriations to try to get enough funding for is for our Human Rights Commission. And our statewide Human Rights Commission, basically they have several jobs, one of which is to sue the state when there's a discriminatory, something discriminatory is alleged. Another piece of it is they contract with HUD to work on discriminatory cases in housing. One thing to know, the country, the US government, identifies certain protected classes, probably 7 or 8 protected classes, and the state of Vermont protects about 12 to 15 different classes of people. So if you bring a suit against a landlord or against the state for discriminatory practices, our Human Rights Commission is there highly are lowly capacitated. They don't have enough capacity to do it. HUD, one of the first things they said when they were saying that transgender people don't really exist anymore, we're not going to believe in that. What they told our Human Rights Commission is that if you bring a suit against the landlords in the housing, and the person who's alleging the discrimination is transgender, we will not reimburse you for that case. And quite frankly, you may lose your license as a Human Rights Commission because we may decide that by representing and protecting the extra people that we protect here in Vermont, that doesn't fit with our outlook, and we may take away your license. So that's just, it's not a simple thing, but it's part of the rot that's coming from DC. And because one of the missions of the Human Rights Commission is to protect state employees, and in particular against discrimination against what may happen by the state government government's not really happy about the Human Rights Commission either way, because they have to protect themselves against these accusations or these allegations. It's not a small thing, but we're talking about maybe $2 million a year to the Human Rights Commission that they're not going to get, which means that that kind of justice is going to be really hard to come by or really hard to promote when they don't have the resources to do it. And so, as Theresa said, every day there's something new. It's really hard to keep track of all of the things that this government is doing, this federal government is doing, and that the Attorney General's office has to respond to, but it is incessant. And what it creates for the people that Theresa's talking about, and for many of us, affordability issues are no longer something that we can say that somebody's for affordability or somebody's against affordability, because every time money is taken away from us, like the millions of dollars that went to SNAP, it comes out of our pockets, and it will make life less affordable on so many different levels, and that doesn't even get into tariffs, that doesn't even get into increased healthcare costs or health insurance costs when all of these things come down. So very frustrating, very potent, and very, I think I'm fearing that there's going to be this tinderbox of what do you support? Do you support, if you don't stand up for Vermonters, are you then not complicit? Which is a terrible word. So that's how I'm preparing for January. Thanks.
So speaking of what's coming out of DC, I think you said the rot coming out of DC, is that?
Rot, R-O-T.
Okay, your word, not mine, I just want to be sure. The rot coming out of DC, so how are we responding to those? I know you've been very active, so we'd love to hear more about them.
So as the Attorney General, my job is to represent the state in court. And when there is a violation of the Constitution, which I swore to uphold when I was sworn in January, I have to bring a lawsuit against the federal government. That's my job as Attorney General. At this point, thanks. And Donald Trump was elected our president, right? And he has every right to install his vision for the country in place, but he has no right to violate the Constitution or federal law. And at this point, I have sued him 36 times, which is a lot. And we probably will have to sue more because he doesn't seem to be getting the message. There are themes with the lawsuits that we've brought. There's themes with the violations. The most common trend, we'll say, is trying to do Congress's job for Congress. Congress has the power of the purse. Under the Constitution, the spending clause says, guess what? Congress gets to spend the taxpayers' money, and it is the executive branch, the president, who executes the laws as they're passed. We see that working fairly functionally here in Vermont. Our legislature, right next door to my office, right next door to the governor's office, they're passing the laws, and the governor is, we'll talk about one example maybe later, but it's all working. Yeah, we're all friends and we get along fine and it's all working. And when you look at the federal government, it's a mess. So if Donald Trump wanted to be a congressman, he should have run for Congress. and he's the president. That's not how it works. So repeatedly, we've had to sue over that issue. And I want to be clear about something. I love saving Vermont tens of millions of dollars, and I have with these lawsuits. But you know what I also love? Standing up for the rule of law, for our constitutional democracy, for all of the separation of powers and the sovereignty of the state, all those principles that we believe as Americans so strongly in. I get to be the patriot who makes that happen, along with my fellow Democratic attorneys general across the country. What a privilege and honor it is to do that work. So that is what I would say, in short, how we're responding. But I want to make one note. One of the many terrible things that have happened in 2025, a really terrible thing was the passage of the so-called One Big Beautiful Bill. Because that was passed by Congress, right? It wasn't like Donald Trump trying to do Congress's job. Congress did their job. They just did it in a way that was unbelievably sloppy and harmful, and we are going to be living with it. It's very disheartening. I mean, even still, the president continues to violate the constitutional mandate that it is Congress who spends the taxpayers' money, but that bill is a real problem. The most important thing, in my view, that we can be doing is focusing on the midterm elections next year, where every single member of the House will be up for re-election, and there are many vulnerable House members, an incredibly unpopular president, and a razor-thin margin between Democrats and Republicans. And history has shown us that in the off year, when there's not a presidential year, there's frequently a flip in the House, and we need for that flip to occur next year so that we can get this country back on track.
Thank you. I know you were talking about lawsuits, so I wanted to move on to a topic that has been in the news around legal matters a lot lately. Many folks submitted questions and significant concerns regarding ICE activity and the administration's aggressive immigration strategy. What is Vermont specifically doing to track removals and protect residents who might be threatened?
Well, I will start by answering that one and just say immigration is a federal issue. So the three of us up here, we work for the state, and it's very frustrating. I just got to tell you all the cool stuff my office is doing and how good it feels to be a patriot standing up for the rule of law. We have a teensy tiny role when it comes to immigration. That is a role assigned to the federal government. And there is a level of helplessness that I feel when especially the case in Manchester, because I'm from Manchester, and it was so impactful to my friends in Manchester. But I feel the way you do often. One thing we did do, and I encourage you can go to our website or the Instagram page that we have. We created a Know Your Rights guide for immigration. And it's not just for people who are undocumented or who have concerns. It's for all of us, their neighbors, their friends, their community members. So we know their rights too. And if there is a moment when we need to get out our phone to create evidence by recording something going down, if we need to give someone a piece of advice, I want everyone to have that resource. And I'm going to take a moment to say that my chief of staff, Lauren Yondel, resident of Huntington, is here, and she made that. Anything to add? It's tricky.
Yeah. Thank you. I was wondering if
we can keep it brief.
Yes. Especially if the two legislatures here could talk about the No Secret Police Act and where that currently stands.
So we've been contacted by many of the folks here and other folks around passing a law that prohibits people in law enforcement from wearing masks, from arriving and not identifying themselves, from essentially, what we've seen, which is, looks a lot like kidnapping. And I'm sure it feels like kidnapping to the people who are being taken. Again, there are going to be some legal matters to work out because we don't have jurisdiction in this area. And so how that will or will not impact federal folks working in Vermont is still a question to be answered. But, there will be work done on that this year. I don't know if
Just that when a bill is introduced, I'm likely to sign on to co-sponsor it, but it is a feeling of anything that happens that can slow things down, whether it's in the court system or whether it's by people intervening. I can't understate the importance of even a meeting like this. It's so much nicer to be in person with a room full of people than it is to be in a Zoom room full of people that I can't touch or hear. And I think that is going to be that's going to be almost as important, if not more important, than any bill that we pass that will then get adjudicated and then go through the court systems. And it's not that it's for nothing, but it is. We don't have that much. We don't have a big role in the federal jurisdictions.
I sit on the Joint Justice Oversight Committee, which is a summer committee that tracks and provides oversight to the Department of Corrections and juvenile justice issues in the state. And the one thing that we were able to do when the state renewed its contract with the immigration authorities, we did document the fact that we wanted to assure that people's rights were protected, wanted to assure that they had legal counsel, that they were given, any kind of medical treatment that they needed, and access to be able to have representation. And so we, as well as also looking out for Vermont taxpayers, that because housing folks was costing more than what the federal government was paying us, and so we were essentially footing the rest of that bill. We felt like we should be, if we're going to do this, and Vermont has had a long-standing policy of or program or presence, I guess if you say, in holding people in immigration, and so. Assuring people's legal rights are protected was one of the things that we wanted to document. That so the legislature did. Our Joint Justice Oversight Committee did send a letter to the governor's staff documenting that these are the things that we would expect to be in any agreement that was penned by the administration.
Can I just a quick follow up on that? I'm hearing what you're all saying, which is like this is really challenging because it's a federal issue. And there's only so much that can be done at the state level. But I'm curious, and you mentioned a couple of things, but you have groups, people like this sitting here tonight, and groups like this that are coming together all over the state, and really, in particular around this issue, that really want to get involved in, are kind of like, it feels a little bit hopeless to say, how can I help? Do you have advice for groups like this or folks like this that aren't bound by certain, regulations of how they can act, but could take action at the community or grassroots level?
I would just, first of all, begin. So I have a thing that's in the back of my head at all times this year, and that is the Joan Baez quote: "Action is the antidote to despair." And even coming here tonight was an action you took that is the antidote to despair, because you're in community talking about these issues we care about. So I always think that's a guiding light during a time like this. When it comes to immigration, something that has weirdly given me comfort is to acknowledge that actually our immigration does kind of suck and needs to be fixed. This is not the way to fix it, especially for Vermont. This is such a misfit for what we need. We need people, right? We lost our perfect bond rating because we're not replacing ourselves. We need people to move here. This is a good thing for us. And so it's, for some reason, I found it comforting to think about a future in which our clunky immigration system that really does need to be fixed is fixed. And isn't that a positive thing to be focusing on instead of focusing on this moment when we feel helpless? But the Know Your Rights Immigration Guide will give you tips that will make you feel empowered. You're gonna know, I'll tell you something that I didn't realize is the right to have a warrant, or when an immigration official is speaking to you, translated so that you can understand it. There's a lot of rights in there, and I think that those tools will be helpful. The other thing that I get asked a lot about is protesting and whether this makes any difference. And I always think about, if you feel comfortable protesting, think about the person who's going to see you protesting on the news or in the newspaper who doesn't feel comfortable protesting because of their race, their immigration status, their LGBTQ orientation, whatever it is. Your voice is representing the other people who can't protest, who don't feel comfortable. So I always feel like that's another positive thing that you can be doing to show your community you care.
And then there's donating money to the Immigration Defense Fund. I'm not sure exactly what the title is. Treasurer Pichak has been taking a lead from a state perspective. They've raised, their goal is to raise $1 million to make sure that they have a team of lawyers, which a year ago was 1 and is now 11. And they are going into ICE facilities, they're going into prisons, and they're trying to get through to the people who are being held there in order to represent them legally, to provide them with the legal resources that they're entitled to by our law. And that costs money. So they've had a goal recently. I think the goal was $1 million. They just went over $500,000 a week or so ago. So if that's your way of protesting or of supporting protesting, then that would be worthy use of your funds at this time.
So your answers actually kind of are leading to my next question, which is great. But I kind of want to take it a next level up a little bit. There were a lot of concerns in the questions that were submitted around even the protection of democracy and freedom of speech and how we engage and have civic dialogue in the country. You use the term patriot a couple times, and kind of thinking about like, how do we? This is a big question, so I'm asking for a little creativity maybe, but like, how do we reclaim that dedication to patriotism and to showing up and connecting? And we see even in Vermont at the very local level, a lot of kind of challenges around trusting each other and trusting our leaders to make the right decisions, and it's leading to a lot of angry dialogue at the community, at the state level, and of course nationally. So you see this kind of breaking down, and I'm wondering, like, what can we be doing to rebuild that kind of connection and to rebuild faith in democracy and how we can make decisions together? Sorry, that was a big long one, but
I think if we for the sake of brevity, if we just say, like, the symbolism is important. Protesting is not symbolism. Protesting is putting yourself out on the line. But a constituent wrote to me and said, why aren't protesters carrying the American flag with them? We love the flag. We love this country just as much as they say they do, whoever they may be. And I didn't have an answer for that. But that could be the symbol of reclaiming what. I mean, I don't have a really highly positive attitude about the way things are going in this country, and I carry the fear of, well, how long is it going to take to get back to, well, what's normal anyway? The idea of just bringing back civility, bringing back equity, accepting people for who they are and letting them be, no matter whether or not they're, so your rights, your pursuit of happiness isn't infringed upon. It starts with symbols. The other piece is the reclaiming, the fixing of the legislation. That's a long, laborious process. Lawsuits will be long, laborious processes that require you to keep reminding us what's important. I mean, some of us have a pretty good idea of what we think is important, and not everybody in the State House feels that way, the same way as we do. That said, it's going to be the power of everybody just not relying on anybody else to do it. And that's just about as simple as I can get, because then there's hours of discussion about how you can actually fix things on paper.
I just reclaimed it. If you go to my social media, it says Charity Clark, mother, attorney, patriot. Why not? That's who I am.
I love that, Charity. I think that's great. I think that it's also, I think, one of the things, and Charity said this a little bit earlier, how, we do, for the most part, get along in the state, and we do have civil conversations even when we're in disagreement. And unfortunately, we have been in disagreement quite a bit in the last bit of time. But I can tell you, when we're sitting in the legislature and we're sitting in committee and we have, people from all walks of life who have come there, some with experience, some with no experience, people who are Republicans, independents, progressives, Democrats, we just do the work. I'll be honest. I mean, we sit down and we do the work. And in the end, we try to reach consensus around things that the vast majority of the committee can support, and oftentimes we come out with unanimous support on a lot of bills. So I want to give people some hope that, we do the work, we do work across the aisle, we do talk with each other about what are the solutions that Vermonters are looking for. So while it's not perfect, it's a heck of a lot better in Vermont than it definitely is at the federal level.
Thank you for that optimism there. We need it. Changing the topic slightly, the governor is being sued over his return to office order, and there have been some questions surrounding the legality of his executive orders, especially the one addressing housing. Can you share your opinions, and especially legal opinions, as well as your reactions to the governor's use of power? Was the housing order an overstep by the administration, or was it a necessary action to meet housing needs?
So we represent the state, and this is whenever the legislature and the governor's office are fighting, we don't like it. It's like mom and dad are fighting, we don't like it. We have a mechanism, every state has this, called a formal legal opinion. It's very rarely used because it's very rare that there are circumstances that would sort of warrant a formal legal opinion. The last formal legal opinion we had was, I think, maybe 11 years ago. So we had an entire tenure of an attorney general who never issued one. So I've just issued one. That was what we did. We had received a request from the legislature to analyze the governor's housing executive order and see if there was anything that was illegal in it. We did that. What we identified is that there were a couple of areas that if the actions were done without rulemaking, then yes, it would be illegal. So we're, that's where we stand. Rulemaking was initiated at least on one, if not both, of those issues. So that's where we are, and we were happy to provide that legal opinion, which is available along with the other legal opinions we've issued on our website, ago.vermont.gov, if you're curious. And that's kind of what I have to say about that. If you want to hear from the legislators.
I think I'll leave the legal opinions to the Attorney General's office. It's a very political issue for us. Our legal counsel did their own opinion that felt like it violated many of the rules around executive orders, and that's what's being talked about in these memos. Fair enough. The question here is, well, what is in the executive order? Not so much that it can happen, but what was the governor saying? And what he was doing was rolling back regulations that had been passed by the House and Senate and signed into law, or if they weren't signed into law, then they were put into law if the governor had vetoed it. I don't recall whether he did or not. But the idea here of telling Vermonters essentially that what the House of Representatives and the Senate passed wasn't really very good, and therefore I'm changing the rules to go back a year or two, is really doesn't really happen very often that blatantly. And so that's what we're working out with ourselves. And whether or not it would create new housing, you can go point by point, excuse me, through the executive order and make arguments that it won't do anything or it might do something, but we really wouldn't know. But what it does is it breaks the trust, or it breaks the system a little bit, and that's what we're not used to at our level.
Another executive order that the governor issued last spring is one that people are maybe not as familiar with, and that's around the hotel and motel program. It's called General Assistance Emergency Housing. And, we didn't ask the Attorney General for an opinion on that one. Although our chief legal counsel was of the opinion that the governor, again, overstepped. And what that really entailed was the legislature had, the background on that is, for the first time since I've been there, and I don't know what other times it's been, but there was no Budget Adjustment Act. That's a common, it happens every year, most years, where the governor's administration comes in and says to the legislature, yes, this was the budget that we passed, that you passed, and that we're implementing, but here are some changes as a result of having lived through that budget for the first 6 months of the year. So budget adjustment came and went twice, and was vetoed by the governor, and we said we're not going to pass another one. And so the central issue was around services and supports for people who are homeless. And the governor did not want to negotiate around that. We wanted to continue to house people. And when I say we, the legislature wanted to continue to do that. And the governor did not want to do that in the way that we were looking at. So he instituted his own executive order and set his own criteria. That was different than the criteria that was in the Appropriations Act. And so that is bearing out with a lot of Human Services Board appeals right now. And there are appeals that are going to the Supreme Court because the governor's staff, the administration, does not like the rulings of the Human Services Board. So that next step is to go to the state Supreme Court, which is where it's at right now. So I think that it's important to know that it's not necessarily a one-off. We're seeing more of this type of thing than we have had in the past.
You mentioned the state Supreme Court. Looking at the larger picture, U.S. Supreme Court, I know that your specialty isn't the national politics, and I was just wondering if you could speak to the consequences of having a Supreme Court that consistently rules in favor of an individual rather than, not necessarily the Constitution, but of the basic policies of our nation.
I would say that this U.S. Supreme Court, which, I don't think this is up for debate, is much farther to the right than the people of Vermont. But I have seen them repeatedly uphold the rule of law. They just declined to overturn the Obergefell, which gave us gay marriage nationally. So I think that they are full of surprises. And I will tell you one thing. I think judges generally, regardless of where they are on the spectrum, don't like another branch telling them what to do. I don't think they like another branch violating the Constitution and making their life hard. Lawyers were boring. We like rules, okay? They like rules too, and they don't like the shenanigans and the chaos. I think that I really think we're gonna repeatedly be surprised that these conservative justices actually don't like that kind of behavior, and they're gonna uphold the rule of law. I've been wrong about a couple of things. I was wrong about Obergefell, happily. But I was worried in the beginning, and people used to ask me in the beginning, is there a constitutional crisis? And I would say, no, there's not. Literally, the court rules, the Trump administration obeys. Sometimes it takes a couple weeks and we have to go back to the court, but eventually they obey. And that is what we have seen all these 11 months. I think that there have been surprises on the judiciary, and but by and large, I've felt a little bit of relief the way that they have upheld the rule of law, and I hope that continues.
Zooming in a bit for our last question before the open discussion, I'd like to focus in on the bill that was just passed for school redistricting. And that's an issue that personally affects me just because I'm still in the public education system and a lot of my friends that I work with in activism. We were wondering how the bill will be playing out for small rural towns, especially with the announcement today of the property taxes, and what mechanisms you see as essential to ensure that we as communities remain protected. Are there systems for a well-supported transition?
Who wants it?
Wow, that's a loaded question. First of all, Act 73 is meant to take, in its purest or most simple form, it's supposed to be a several-year process. This first year process was to have this task force come out. The December 1 letter, if you haven't read the news, or and I'm not sure it led the news tonight, but it's predicting or it's expecting that school boards across the state will have to raise the money for education by 11.9%, so 12%. The letters are sometimes accurate, sometimes not accurate, and they take into account things like last year's bill included 10 cents of the increase had to do with health insurance. This year, there's going to be a chunk of that increase because we took $77 million or more last year to buy down the rate a little bit, which is not great economics, but it's better politics than it is economics. You still have to pay for it eventually. It's a credit card. So 73, though, the way it's set up for the educational part of the reform, which is the first piece, because you can't change the funding program until you know what you're funding. That's going to be a several-year process, and what we saw that's actually notable about that process is that the task force that was formed and staffed by people who kind of know what they're really doing, if you were comparing the CVs of the people who are on that committee versus the non-legislative people who are on that committee, they came to a conclusion that the initial goal of trying to reduce the number of school districts to 5, the things that the governor and the Secretary of Education have been really vocal on as cost reductions, even though the administration has admitted that reducing the number of school districts to 5 will result in no cost reductions. The governor has been making a lot of political hay with that. So on the other hand, school districts are starting to make changes on their own, which I think in the end is one of the better solutions. So when neighboring school districts, and we already have, MMU, your school, CVU next door, these are large schools. And as here in Chittenden County, they represent a large percentage of the students in the state, but they're already made up of however many towns. So there's an element there that is, what you put out in theory may not work well in practice. And this task force, at least this year, came up with answers that the administration didn't like, but frankly, I can't be too surprised because in my time here, I've lived through Act 68, I've lived through Act 46, I've acted through 127. So there's been a lot of attempts to make reforms, and the question, it's been so many that you just go, well, what are reforms? What reforms are you looking for? Are you looking for a way to make it less expensive, which is somehow changing the way you're funding education, which we still believe is one of the most important things we can do for our children in the state of Vermont? Or are we trying to reform the education system by denying them the money that it would take to run a legitimate public school system. That's been the issue forever. And so I'm not sure we'll ever find that answer, but but there will be fallout from this task force report. There will be some really tough times in the education committees in the State House talking about how are we going to move forward. But immediately, it's a process. It's going to take time.
I think that I've been through as chair of a school board that merged 2 school districts. Waterbury and Duxbury merged together and built a new middle school, and we got 50% state aid because we were merging 2 school districts. I think that we will see a lot of political heyday around this. There is very little, if anything, to be saved by consolidating districts. So you will have fewer superintendents, you'll have larger central offices, and if we were to build it today, if we were to start with what we have today, or start building a school system, we wouldn't build what we have today. I think that's pretty clear. It's like our healthcare system. We wouldn't necessarily build what we have today, but you can't do that in isolation. And I think that, the committee that's been working all summer heard from over 5,000 Vermonters, and that's a lot of Vermonters that express some very serious doubts about the outset of, needing to consolidate districts just for the purpose of saying, we have fewer students and we don't need as many districts as we have. I think that's kind of what I would call it's a lost leader. It's kind of like it's not what the real issues are. We do have an inequitable taxing system, a system where local school districts can approve an amount in their town that will be more than what they pay for in their town. And the other towns, the rest of us, pay for it. And likewise, we have some of our poorer school districts that don't pass budgets and are already spending less than what we really think it costs to educate our students equitably in the state. And so we don't have a situation where where students have equal access, and the funding system that we have now is not doing what it set out to do, and so we do need to change that. How exactly that happens, there's going to be a lot of discussion and debate about it, but I would encourage you not to buy into we have to merge all our school districts into 5 to 10 or 11 school districts, because that is not going to save us the money, or I guess I would say reduce the increases year over year, because we're not going backwards, folks. I can just let you know that. So I think that it's important to keep education at the front, and to not buy into some of the political rhetoric that we have already heard about this. Even before the report was finally issued, it was issued today. It was the governor was calling it a failed outcome, and hadn't even read the report yet. And that's not really fair, because those folks spent a lot of time, and they listened to a lot of people, and that's what we're talking about, democracy. To bring it back to democracy, listening to the people of the state is what they did.
All right, so we're going to shift gears a little bit, unless there's anything else on that.
Closer.
It's not on, actually. Could you turn the... It is now. Thank you, Ben. We're going to shift gears a little bit and actually come out with the mic to the floor if you all have a question. If there were things that we didn't touch on yet that you want to hear about, things that you want to hear more about, I'm going to come around with the mic. Henry's going to hold down the fort on the stage here. A couple things. So one is that we've only got about 20 minutes-ish. So we have time for a few questions. So I'm just going to ask, we don't have time for speeches or anything like that, just a concise question. And one thing about me that you'll see is I don't let go of the microphone. So I'm going to hold on to it. It's a little awkward. I'm going to hold it for you. Some people way. I'm comfortable with it, but I am going to hold on to it just to keep us moving along. Does anyone have a question that they want to start with? Yes, in the front here. And feel free to say your name and stand up if you'd like, or sit.
I just wondered if you could comment on what changes might be coming to Vermont Medicaid, specifically whether or not our waiver might be impacted and whether or not there are going to be work requirements.
We definitely have changes coming to Vermont Medicaid, and that's I refuse to call it the, BBBA or whatever. I'll just call it HR 1. That's its official number. Yes, work requirements. SNAP has work requirements. There are folks who have been doing analysis and believe that if we have sufficient outreach to folks, that we can avoid most folks falling off on Medicaid. However, I don't believe that we are going to see a budget from the administration that provides the resources to our community partners, like the community action agencies or the mental health agencies or the shelters, people who are out seeing Vermonters on Medicaid every day. Those are the folks who really would need the additional resources in order to make sure that people meet the requirements. And part of this is designed to get people off from Medicaid, and having to do this every 6 months. And they're now talking about having to do something similar for SNAP. And so it is designed to get people off. And in states where they've done this at the state level already, it has done just that. And they're now trying to figure out the ramifications of that. So the answer is yes, unfortunately.
Anything else on that? All right, yes, right here.
Jeff Forward from Richmond and Camel's Hump Indivisible. We had a similar event in September, and the focus of that event was the No Secret Police Act. And what we heard from Senator Rom Hinsdale was that, she was worried that the governor would veto it if they passed it. If the legislature passed it. However, California has passed this law, and we expressed the opinion that we weren't afraid of the governor's veto. It still stakes out what a Vermont value. What we would like is what I would ask is for a commitment from the legislators to pursue the No Secret Police Act, regardless of what the governor is going to do. How do you feel about that?
I don't have any problem committing to that. And I am not afraid of a gubernatorial veto, and not afraid of working towards overriding a veto. I've done it before.
I have no problem supporting that. The decisions end up getting made at a much higher level, but those decisions get changed when there's enough pressure coming from below. And so, like Representative Wood, like Theresa, there's been 57 gubernatorial vetoes in the 10 years or whatever, however long he's been governor. So it's not that. It's putting. It does put people on the spot, and there are people who are going to be worried about, well, should we spend all this time on something that the governor's just going to veto? And that's a real calculation for people, but this is beyond political calculation. This is really about morals and ethics and how you're going to react to what we feel might be just a horrible, horrible situation.
Yeah, I'm going to go to the back first and work my way up. I'm going to get my steps in. Just going to come behind you right over here.
Hi there. I'm Amy Roth. I live in South Burlington. I do a lot of grassroots organizing for Vermont Interfaith Action. We're working on housing and affordable housing and homelessness, and I have deep, deep concerns about the executive order that the Trump administration issued around criminalization of individuals who are homeless, and I see it as a terrible slippery slope in terms of people with mental illness, people with substance use, people with disabilities, elders as well, as Theresa well knows. And I'm just wondering if you support any legislation. I know the ACLU is doing some work on legislation to put some guardrails and protections for folks who are homeless in terms of not sweeping them off the streets.
Thank you for that question, Amy. So yes, I'm familiar with the legislation that's being put forth, the bill that's being introduced, and I definitely support it. I think that the executive order that the president issued around that is doing exactly what you just said, criminalizing disability and illness in people. And you know, frankly, the policies that are coming out of HUD and other federal agencies are doing the same thing. And so, yes, I will definitely be supporting that bill.
Attorney General Clark, I saw you kind of nodding your head. I'm curious, do you have anything to follow up on the executive order?
Well, I would just, speaking of the president's executive orders, something that I like to remind people of, because I've read most of them, a lot of them actually don't do anything. They're just a lot of mean words. And then at the end, it says something like, so Attorney General or so Secretary of such and such, why don't you write a memo about this? And it's like the biggest could have been an email, but he wanted to say a bunch of mean words, so he made it into executive order. And repeatedly, it's basically like telling someone, just do your job. So if we allow ourselves, because I was really upset by this too. I was worked up when I read this one, but sometimes it's nice to just say, well, that was a lot of mean words that doesn't do anything, that doesn't have a lot of power behind it, because the president doesn't have that power actually, and it's nice to get grounded in that. So if a crazy executive order comes out and you find yourself getting worked up, just look at the end and see, what does this actually do? And then, you know what also is always in the executive orders? Below the, hey, Secretary such and such do this, is a disclaimer. This executive order isn't intended to be contrary to any actual law. So they're even baked in there as like, if we're breaking the law, we actually don't mean to break the law. So the executive orders, some of them are horrible and do stuff, and a lot of them just don't do anything. So keep that in mind, keep that perspective.
Great. I feel like you should market some recordings of these statements that when this news comes out, to have you saying it's not really doing anything would be really helpful. Or the Supreme Court follows the rule of law. Yes.
I just had a quick question about the SNAP. Will the state be reimbursed for the money it put out?
Most likely not. We knew that going in.
Why not?
Because the federal government, in the end, paid the SNAP. But that's why I said we did the right thing. We wish we didn't have to do that, but we weren't going to let people go for the entire month of November without knowing what was going to happen with regard to their food. So, no, it's about $6 million.
I understand why it was done. I don't understand why it's not being reimbursed.
Because that's the power that they have to say whether they're going to or whether they're not going to.
It's a choice.
Yeah. It doesn't mean that we're not going to pursue it. That's a different thing, because we will be and are pursuing getting reimbursement. So we want them, we don't want them to tell us no, but we, as being responsible, to the taxpayers of Vermont, will pursue reimbursement, but we do not believe that we will receive it. And in fact, they wrote that in a memo. There have been probably at this point in time, probably between 8 and 10 or 11 memos that they've issued on SNAP. They're doing everything by memo, and then they realize they made a mistake, or it's not what they meant to say, or somebody points out, well, you can't do that, that's illegal, and so then they'll issue another memo clarifying the memo or the 3 memos that they wrote before that. But they've been consistent in saying that states who issued any state payments for SNAP would not be reimbursed.
So next year, when I do my federal taxes, I should see a little reimbursement for the month that they did not pay the state SNAP?
Yeah, that'd be nice, but.
So we've got, I'm looking to that, we've got just a few more minutes, correct? Is that, so let's do 1, 2. Okay.
I have a question for the Attorney General about the idea of a no secret police Act in Vermont. I understand California passed that law, and now it's in litigation, and I wonder what your thoughts about that are for Vermont.
I love when California passes a law, and then I love when someone sues and we get to find out what happens at the end, and then we can do the same thing or not do the same thing. We do that all the time. Well, these guys do that all the time. So this is sort of a perfect win-win for Vermont. We're just going to sit back and eat our popcorn and wait for things to resolve themselves, and then we'll do the the right thing and know that we're following. We're not going to find ourselves in court because California already did the hard work for us.
And then a last question here.
My question is also for the Attorney General. Last year, in your lawsuit with the state auditor, you claimed your office has powers that would let you bypass the courts and decide suits between state officers and important constitutional questions yourself. My question is, how can we trust you to push back against executive overreach when you yourself have engaged in it?
I guess I'm not following your question. I engaged, are you accusing me of engaging in executive overreach?
Yes.
Could I ask us to remain polite in our accusations, please? Thank you.
Yeah.
So I am happy to provide you with a little bit more information about the lawsuit. The Auditor of Accounts sued me, the Attorney General, on behalf of his office and himself personally. And it's because he did not like the opinion that I gave him, a legal opinion that he'd asked for. This was decided, initially it was dismissed on the lower court for suing in the wrong venue, the wrong court. It was refiled in the correct venue. The auditor lost at the trial level. He appealed it to the Vermont Supreme Court, and he lost at the Vermont Supreme Court.
There was more than that in your filings. Correct me if I'm wrong here, but my understanding is that you claimed that because the Attorney General represents all state officers, you could essentially decide not to take this case against yourself.
Wait, so you think I could represent him as his lawyer in a case against me?
That was my understanding of your legal filings, yes.
I think that would be a straight up ethical violation and kind of a mess. Who would want the person they were suing to represent them in court?
Okay. So I want to stop any back and forth here, so maybe a conversation afterward makes sense, but appreciate the question. And any clarifying last comment that you want to make?
This is all public record, so if people are interested, you could look it up.
Okay. One final question, and then I promise I'll be done. Okay.
So we're all breathing a sigh of relief that Obergefell stands, but it was a weak case, and there's much worse coming down the pike. Is there any kind of protections that we can look to the state for?
What I always say about this issue, it's uncomfortable, but here in Vermont, we're safe. These guys did their jobs, and we're safe. And I don't like basking in our privilege and thinking there are other Americans who aren't safe. But when we have to kind of get in touch with our fear, we have to remember we have rights in this wonderful state that a lot of Americans unfortunately no longer have. We have a right to reproductive liberty, thanks to these guys, and all of us. You know, Jenna talked about how she gets to brag about how great Vermont is in her work. Well, I get to do that too, and I want to tell you the first time I was at a conference with all of the Democratic AGs and 450 people, and I said the same day I was elected Attorney General in 2022, Vermont also voted to enshrine the right to abortion in our Constitution, and every single town, 100% of the towns. So we have rights when it comes to gay marriage and LGBTQ rights. We have rights when it comes to our bodies that they don't have in other places. So just keep that in mind.
All right, well, it's 6:59, so I have 1 minute to work with, and I'm just going to use this last minute. We do want to end, and I know we're going to hear some more actions. We want to end focus on action. We talked a little bit about things that folks in this room can do. Maybe we can just go through. Hello. Okay, this one. And each of you would just love to hear a last comment, whether it's a word or a sentence. We don't have time for more than that. But what is the number one thing that folks in this room should be focused on, should be doing, should be taking action on today to continue to move this work forward?
Number one thing you could do is adopt a congressional race in a purple district. We love Becca Balint. We're not worried about her, right? Pick another race. Georgia, upstate New York, there's a bunch. That's your race. Who? Tennessee tomorrow. That's your race. You adopt it. You're writing postcards. You're donating. You could just go there and knock on doors. That's your race. That's your ride or die. You're reading the newspaper in that town. That's your race, and you're going to make sure that the Democrat wins.
And I'm going to borrow that and say buy local, because Democrats lost a lot of seats in 2024, and it doesn't matter what the reasons were, it doesn't matter how we want to twist it, but we lost a lot of seats, we lost our supermajority, we lost our ability to override the governor when he does the things that he's doing this year. He's taking a pound of flesh away from all of us, and he's enjoying, just being able to say this is what he wants to do and you can't override me. And that, I can't even tell you, that is so important for us to retain at least a stronger majority. So if you live in a district that has races where there are people who belong to different parties, then I think you just need to also apply some of your adoptions to make sure that your locals get elected. We need a stronger, a lot of people told me last year that we ended up with, you were doing too much. You were doing too many things. And it's like, no, we were holding the rear guard action against what's happening, not what's happened in 2025. And we would like to be able to get back to doing that, because it's really, our democracy and our ability to help people is really fragile. So don't forget us.
All right, final word, Theresa.
I think I'm going to leave you with a word, and that's hope. And I think that, it can feel really dark sometimes, and we feel like we don't have power to do what we feel should be done. And it's not really true. If we don't remain hopeful that things can change, then we'll get stuck in that place of not taking back our power and exercising that power. So stay hopeful even when it seems like it's impossible.
Thank you. That was enlightening. And want to make a quick plug here for Camel's Hump, Indivisible, and for Huntington Acts Now. I heard on the stage something about pressure. You're the pressure. Yes. Getting out there and doing something is the pressure. It's your voice. It's what we need. We need it from you. We need it from your friends. We need it from your family. And part of what Camel's Hump, Indivisible, and Huntington Acts Now will provide is a conduit to help with some of the technology issues, with researching some of the issues that you'll need to go over with adopting somebody in another state, whether they're a congressional person that's holding on to something by a thread, or whether it's just a tough race. So we've been involved in a number of different phone banks and a number of different postcard writing initiatives with people in this room. We need to do more of that. We need to get together, and we'll help to provide a conduit for that. So downstairs, if you're not already a member of one of the two organizations, feel free to visit the table to sign up to be a member. We've also got some cool swag and restrooms and some refreshments. So feel free to hang out and mingle a little bit. And thank you so much for your time.